Good morning, my classy people. I'm here sporting my old man t-shirt. Never underestimate an old man who loves horse racing. My name is Wayne Bolden. I'm the Speed King. We're 8 days out from the Breeders' Cup championship races. And of course, tip sheets are available. Emails at SpeedKing24. Hey, I wanted to bring something to the community's attention, and I want your input on this. And I just wanted to share some information that always rattle around in my head around this time of the year. And with the little bit of data that I have, but still have it, the question to you: does it matter in the Breeder Cup races, and we're going to focus on the Classic, when the connections of a said horse announce their retirement before the race? Again, the word being retirement. It's been in my experience that when the announcement is done before the Breeders' Cup races, those horses never win. Now, no one tracks this data, and I'm going to get into how it came into my wheelhouse accidentally, because as horse players we collect information we don't even know we're collecting, and in retrospect we're like, wait a minute. And again, the question: does it matter with horses being announced that they're going to retire before their last race? In my data that I've collected over the last 23 years or whatever, and it's sporadic, says no. It does not. Now, why is that important, or the connections announce it when they announce it? Well, I think it has something maybe to do with the stud value of the stud book for the horse. If you get the deal in place before his last race, it would be better than if they raced and he or she didn't run well or win the race than you would get after the race. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's get into how I came across this. Well, the only Breeders' Cup race I've ever been to in my life was 2001, right after 9/11 at Belmont Park. I'll never forget it because a couple things significant happened for me. I never went through a turnstile, and they were checking us, and metal detectors, and the military was out there with M16s. I'll never forget it. And it was October. It was really, really cold that day, October 27th, 2001. And also what's significant about that day is really the first time that I came in contact with the Godolphin connections, right? I was up there buying me a sausage and green pepper sandwich from the inside somewhere, and there was a whole slew of people, and they were dressed in their regular clothing according to their beliefs and stuff, but there was a bunch of them there in blue jackets, a lot of them, right? It had to be 20 or 30 of them. And those jackets were just so awesome. And I struck up a conversation with one of the younger men, and I said, man, I would love to have one of those jackets. And he took my name and number down, and I'll get you one. And I waited 15 years to get one. And I didn't get the jacket, but you do see me with the vest. So I did get the vest. So he did hold on his promise. So that's when I start to follow Godolphin and fall in love with them back in 2001. And it is the year that Tis Now won the second Breeders' Cup. But it didn't come really to fruition with me really into 2007. Okay, in 2001, that applied because Galileo ran in that Breeders' Cup on 2001 at Belmont. That was the race that Tisnow, of course, won his second Breeders' Cup Classic. And I was in love with a horse there called Albert the Great, bred and owned by Tracy Farmer, Mark Cassidy, during the training, and he ran third. Nisaki ran second that day. But Galileo was 3-1 in that race, and they announced his retirement before that race, and he ran sixth. Didn't mean nothing to me then. I didn't think. Well, I mean, I didn't even know this, and that was 2001. When it came to pass for me was in 2007 with Street Sense, and that particular Breeders' Cup Classic was being run at my home track at Monmouth Park. And I was going through the data, regular racing or whatever, and they announced that Street Sense was going to retire after that race. Well, I kind of really liked Street Sense that day. That's the race that Curlin won, Hard Spun ran second, and Awesome Jim ran third. Well, Street Sense in that Breeders' Cup Classic in 2007 at Monmouth Park, I surely bet him, and I had Curlin a little bit because everybody knows that I thought he should have won the Derby Curlin as well as Gun Runner. We'll get to one of his runners as well, or get to him. Street Sense didn't win that race in 2007. And then I started to think back to Galileo back in 2001. I said, wait a minute, they announced his retirement too. He didn't win. But again, the data was sporadic at that time. He was only two Street Sense of horses that I even kind of put that together. I don't even know how it stuck in my mind. And then it really, really started to take hold with me in 2017 and the only time it comes up is when somebody announced it, and then you're like, wait a minute, hold on. In 2017, Arrogate, that Arrogate, right? And, he beautiful sire that kicks out some beautiful babies. Arrogate in 2017 announced his retirement before that Breeders' Cup Classic, and he ended up finishing fifth. And he was a short price. That's the race that Gun Runner won. Collected ran second, and a horse called West Coast ran third, and Arrogate ran fifth. So now I have three examples from 2001, 2007, and 2017 where these, the connections are announcing this, and the stud book is in play, and they're not looking to whip and lash. And of course, if they're there, they'll win the race. But that's really when it came into fruition, where I had three examples of horses announcing it. One being Galileo, which was of no effect to me. I didn't think anything of it. I really didn't start to compare it until 2007 with Street Sense at Monmouth Park. I'm like, wow, Galileo back in 2001 announced too. I kind of looked over it. But when Arrogate did it in 2017, I'm like, wait a minute. So I just kept an eye on it, and I never think about it until somebody announced, okay, horse X is going to retire after this race. And then the example before Arrogate was Declaration of War in 2013. He finished third. That was Mucho Macho Man won that race, and Will Take Charge ran second. The favorite in that race was Game On Dude, who ran like 9th or 11th at $1.70, $1.70 or something, ran like 9th. But Declaration of War, an Aidan O'Brien runner, announced retirement before that Breeders' Cup. And I think he was like, 4 or 5. He was 6-1, I believe, or 4-1. And so I start to get data, right? So at this point in 2017, I had 4 examples. Galileo, who announced before Breeders' Cup Classic they were going to retire him. He finished 6th. In 2007, Street Sense announced he was 4 some short price, and he ran 4th. In 2013, Declaration of War, the Aidan O'Brien horse, finished 3rd once they announced before, and then Arrogate in 2017. So I have 4 very strong announcements there that I started I don't look for it, I wait to hear it. If I hear it, I may have missed a lot of them, but if they announce it, and that's what turns the light on in my head. Another example from last year, which is the most recent, Well, City of Troy announced he was in the Breeders' Cup Classic, City of Troy, and he was finished eighth. He was 3-1. That's the race where Sierra Leone won, and Fierceness, and like that, right? This is last year. And also, not just the Classic, but other horses last year announced their retirement before the race, and they didn't win the race. Not that they're supposed to, but it's just some more data. Big Eve, who was in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, finished eighth at 13-1, and also in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint was Bradshaw, who finished 11th, I think, somewhere there, way down there, at 6-1. So those are three horses from last year: City of Troy, Big Eve in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and Bradshaw also in the same race as Big Eve. And also Domestic Product. I believe Chad Brown trained Domestic Product. Help me out there. It just sounds right. Announced his retirement, and he was 3-1, and he finished third. That's the race where Full Serrano won the race. I wish Full Serrano was in this year's Breeders' Cup. That's a nice horse. So, my question to you, because we know that Sierra Leone Connections announced that he will be retiring. I forget where, too. Now, the little caveat here is Fierceness is also retiring. However, they announced his retirement last year before the Breeders' Cup race, and he did run third. But the fact of the matter is, they announced it, and he didn't retire. They said they was going to run him at 4, and they did. Okay? But that being said, he's still retiring after this race, even though it was announced last year. And by the way, when they announced it, they wasn't announcing it at the end of 2024 he was going to retire. He still didn't win the race. But the fact was, it was not announcing his retirement. They had plans on running him at 4, and they did, right? And you always take a wait-and-see approach because they say one thing and do the other. But they did run him at 4, but he's still showing up in the Classic this time, and we do know he will retire. So, we got 4 examples from last year. Of course, we got my examples going all the way back to Galileo in 2001, the Breeders' Cup, the only one I've ever been to, other than Monmouth Park. I don't really count that. That's just a day at the races, to be honest with you. Street Sense, Arrogate, and Declaration of War. And I don't know all the horses that announced retirement in the other Breeders' Cup races this year. I don't know who those horses are. I just know the 2 big players because it's so widely publicized, because it's 2 top contenders in the Breeders' Cup and in the biggest race of them all, the granddaddy called the Breeders' Cup Classic. So the fact of the matter is, maybe I have to do a little more homework and find out what other horses in the other Breeders' Cup races are announcing it. And I think it has to do with the stud book and the fee and all those things, right? To announce it before the race, because you can get more money now with what his black type and his races are, or her races are, than if the horse runs bad and, God forbid, something catastrophic happened, which we never hope happen. The value is not the same. And then it's the other caveat. I was talking to one of my mentors about this. How cranked up or how hard are they going to ride their horse that they know the horse has great stud value and like that, right? Sure, they'll win the race if it's sitting there for the taking. That's not even suggestive. But how dialed in and pushing and whipping and all whatever they do to ride the horse to the win, taking chances, right, and like that, when they know that this is the horse's last race. We don't want to get her or him hurt. Get a nice race around the track or whatever. And I'm not saying that's what's going on, but if I owned one like that and I was going to retire him or her, and it was of the ability and talent of a Street Sense or a Galileo, Arrogate, and in our case Fierceness that I know of, and Sierra Leone, shoot, I might just say forget the race, just retire him or her now, because things happen, but you can't live your life like that but how serious are they? So those are the two factors for me. One, they announce it before the race because of the stud value won't go down because it's locked now. And two, because you do have a deal on the table, how serious are you with training and cranking the horse up and like that? Do they want to win the race? Well, I mean, it's $7-8 million race. Of course they do. But they also have to look at their future self instead of their current self. So that's the data that I have. I don't even know what to do with it, right? But the fact of the matter is, these horses that I've given you, the Galileos, the Street Sense, the Arrogates, the Declaration of War, announced and they didn't win their race. And a lot of them were short prices. And last year, the closest example we have, City of Troy, I think he was 3-1 in the Breeders' Cup Classic and ended up finishing 8th. As well as Big Eve in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, finishing 8th. And Bradsell finishing 11th. In the Breeders' Cup Sprint, both of them horses. And then maybe the most famous of them all outside the City of Troy last year was Domestic Product in the Dirt Mile, finishing 3rd behind Full Serrano. I like that horse, by the way, Full Serrano. Right? He better show up in the Breeders' Cup somewhere. Maybe in the Breeders' Cup Mile he'll show up. So you have four from last year alone that announced, and then neither one of them won. So I throw it out to the community, y'all. Again, just some not useless, but information that I gathered over the years, not looking for it. It kind of fell in my lap, particularly after Street Sense, because when Street Sense did it, I was like, wait a minute. Galileo, then you don't kind of not pay no attention. But when Arrogate did it, or Declaration of War and then Arrogate, I'm like, hold on a minute. Then I did some investigation now. Now I know about Sierra Leone and Fierceness, and I don't even know if Fierceness applies to this scenario because they announced where he would retire. They didn't announce his retirement last year. I think it's Ashford, right? But the fact of the matter is he will retire this year. So I think it still kind of apply. Now I need to go find out if any other announcements were made in the other 13 Breeders' Cup races, because it's across all of them. So all the data that I've had, and I probably missed a ton because it only comes up if somebody mentions the horses being retired in your Breeders' Cup, and it probably applies to other races that I don't have no clue about. But I can at least share that with you, and I gave you the data. I remember me asking my mentor about it, and he said to me, and I quote, "That's silliness." And he meant that. He asked me to quantify it. He said, "How do you quantify it?" I had no data to quantify it. But now I do. I do have some examples. So at least it's a small example, 4 from last year and about 5 or 6 from all the way back to 2001. But at least if he was still alive, Mr. Freeman, not Mr. Freeman, Mr. Ragusin, I wouldn't have to hear him say, how do you quantify that? Because he always say, well, you just can't make statements and you show me something. Right? And this is what I got. So there it is. Let me know what you think. Let me know, how you feel about it. But right now, from where I sit, and it's hard to say because these are top horses, Fierceness and Sierra Leone. These are fast horses, and they have every right to win the Breeders' Cup Classic. But right now, they should be tossed. No, he didn't. I'm just saying. I didn't say I'm going to toss them because that's hard to do. But from what I got, let me know what you think, y'all. I just wanted to share that with our community. Let's keep it in-house, and keep it classy, will you? Okay, I'm just sharing information like we all share, right? That's all. I'm just saying what I'm saying. And all the horses I talked about, you can go back and see. What I was saying is true. Should we toss Fierceness and Sierra because they're being retired after this last Breeders' Cup Classic?